The key didn't slide in the way it used to. I stood there in my own driveway, duffel bag still over my shoulder, staring at the front door like it was a stranger's house. The paint looked the same. The porch light was the same. Even the crack in the top right corner of the frame was still there. But the lock felt wrong. I pushed the key in harder. It stopped halfway. For a second, I actually laughed under my breath. Jet lag. Wrong key ring. I tried another one. Then another. None of them worked. That's when I noticed the keypad bolted beside the door. That wasn't there before. My stomach tightened. I stepped back and looked through the window. The curtains inside were different. Darker. Heavier. And then I saw movement. Someone walked past my living room. I froze. Maybe my sister came early to surprise me. Maybe someone was checking on the place. I knocked. Silence. Then the deadbolt clicked from the inside. Not opening. Locking. My heart started pounding, not the battlefield kind. The confused kind. The kind where nothing makes sense. And then I heard it. A voice from behind the door. Can I help you? I swallowed. This is my house. A pause. No, the voice said calmly. It's not. And that's when the police lights flashed behind me in my own driveway. If you've ever felt powerless in your own home, stay with me. What happened next wasn't just about a lock. It was about lies, paperwork, and people who thought I'd never come back. Before we go further, hit like, subscribe, and comment locked out if you're ready to see how this unfolds. 3 months earlier, the house still sounded alive. The screen door used to creak the same way every summer afternoon. My dad never fixed it. Said a home should make noise so you know it's breathing. The mailbox still had our last name stamped crooked into the metal. He let me hammer the letters in when I was 12. I remember standing in the driveway the morning I left for deployment, checking the windows twice even though there was nothing to worry about. I unplugged the coffee machine. Turned the thermostat lower. Routine things. Normal things. My cousin Marcus leaned against his truck and asked if I wanted him to grab the mail sometimes. Yeah, I said, tossing him a spare key. Just junk letters anyway. I didn't think about the small white envelopes with the HOA logo in the corner. They'd been coming more often that year, reminders about grass height, trash bin placement, a warning about the shade of brown I painted the fence. Annoying, but harmless. That's what I thought. Before I left, I called the association office and told them I'd be overseas for a while. The woman on the phone sounded bored but said she'd note the account. I believed her. Out there, time doesn't move normally. Weeks disappear. You stop tracking normal life details, bills, weather, what day trash pickup happens. Home freezes in your mind exactly how you left it. Meanwhile, back here, things were still moving. Envelopes kept arriving. Then certified letters. Then red stamps. But they weren't reaching me. Somewhere along the line, my mailing address in their system changed. Not to the base. Not to Marcus. To a place I'd never lived. By the time I stepped back into my driveway, someone had already decided I wasn't coming home. The police lights didn't feel real at first. They flashed against my truck like it was some kind of movie scene, blue washing over the garage door, red cutting across the windows of the house I grew up in. An officer stepped out slowly, hand resting near his belt but not on his weapon. Sir, he called, calm but firm, we received a report of someone attempting to force entry. For a second, I actually looked behind me. Someone? I live here, I said, holding up my keys like proof. This is my house. The officer glanced at the front door. The new keypad. The curtains. Do you have ID with this address? I hesitated, not because I didn't, but because something in his tone had already shifted the ground under my feet. I handed him my driver's license. He studied it. The address matched. So why did he still look unsure? Behind us, the front door cracked open 2 inches. A chain latch held it in place. A woman I didn't recognize peeked out. "He doesn't live here," she said quickly. "We just signed a lease last month." A lease. The word hit like a delayed explosion. I stared at her. She looked nervous, not angry. Not confrontational. Just uncomfortable. "Ma'am," the officer asked her gently, "who do you lease from?" She gave a company name. It wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone in my family. It was the developer that had been pushing community improvements before I left. My mouth went dry. The officer turned back to me. "Sir, according to the documents we've been shown, the property was transferred after non-payment of association dues." Transferred. Non-payment. Association dues? "I was deployed," I said quietly. The officer's jaw tightened just slightly, the first flicker of doubt. But then another car pulled up. HOA logo on the side. Out stepped the association president herself, clipboard in hand, smile sharp and rehearsed. "We tried contacting him for months," she said smoothly. No response. "We followed procedure." Procedure. I felt the humiliation rise in my chest, not anger yet. Something heavier. Neighbors had started gathering. Phones were out. And suddenly, I wasn't a homeowner. I was a spectacle. And for the first time since I came back, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if they really think this is legal? I didn't argue in the driveway. That surprised even me. Instead, I asked one simple question. "Can I see the paperwork?" The HOA president smiled like she'd been waiting for that. "Of course," she said, pulling a folder from her clipboard. Too prepared. Inside were copies, notices of delinquency, late fees stacking month after month, a lien filing, and finally something labeled notice of foreclosure transfer. My name was printed at the top. My address. But the mailing address listed underneath wasn't mine. It was an apartment across town I'd never stepped foot in. "That's not my address," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "That's the address we have on file." On file. The officer shifted his weight, watching both of us carefully. "When was this address updated?" I asked. She flipped a page casually. 6 months ago." 6 months. That was 2 weeks after I deployed. My stomach tightened. "I didn't change it," I said quietly. She didn't respond directly. Instead, she tapped another page. "You failed to respond to multiple certified notices. Under HOA bylaws, the board voted to recover the property." Recover. Like I was debris. The developer's name appeared again at the bottom, purchaser of record. I felt something colder than anger now. Calculation. "If you voted," I said slowly, "there should be meeting minutes." Her smile thinned. "They're archived." "Public record?" I pressed. A pause. "Long enough to matter." "Yes," she finally said. Small win. But she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. The property has already changed hands. The new tenants have rights." Tenants. Rights. And what did that make me? A trespasser in my own driveway. The officer cleared his throat. "Sir, if this is a civil dispute, you'll need to take it to court." Court. That meant time. Money. And in the meantime? I glanced at the house again. Through the window, I saw a moving box labeled garage, personal items. They were packing my things. "I want a copy of everything," I said. The HOA president nodded. "You'll receive it at your mailing address." The wrong one. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had changed my address on purpose. And they had done it knowing I couldn't answer back. That night I didn't go to a hotel. I sat in my truck parked 2 streets away from the house. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until morning, just until offices opened, just until someone admitted there'd been a mistake. But the porch light turned off at midnight, and nobody came out looking for me. I watched strangers walk across my living room. They moved normally, comfortable, like they belonged there. And the longer I watched, the more dangerous the thought became. What if legally they do? I pulled my wallet out and stared at my driver's license again. My address was printed clearly. Same as always. Same place I'd memorized filling out military forms 100 times. But paper mattered more than memory now. I replayed the last year in my head, every missed call, every unknown number I ignored overseas because it came in at 3 a.m., every time I told myself I'd deal with paperwork when I got back. Maybe I should have checked more. Maybe I should have asked someone to open every letter. Maybe I should have. I stopped. That line of thinking felt familiar. The same kind soldiers fall into after missions, searching for the exact moment they could have prevented something already done. Across the street, a curtain moved again. I instinctively straightened in my seat before realizing how ridiculous that was. I wasn't on patrol. I was hiding from my own front door. My hands were steady overseas. Here, they weren't. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and exhaled slowly. Anger wanted to take over. Kick the door in. Force the truth out. But something quieter, heavier, settled instead. If I lost control even once, they'd win instantly. So I made a decision I didn't feel ready for. No shouting. No threats. Only proof. Because whatever this was, it wasn't going to be fixed by explaining. It was going to be fixed by evidence. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, the same building that used to host summer barbecues and holiday potlucks. Now it felt like a courtroom without rules. Every chair was filled by the time I walked in. Conversations lowered but didn't stop. People weren't pretending not to stare. They wanted to see what the problem homeowner looked like. At the front of the room sat the board, 5 of them behind a folding table, water bottles lined up like props. The president sat in the middle, posture perfect, smile already prepared. A small sign-in sheet waited near the door. I wrote my name. The woman beside it glanced down, then back up at me. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. I didn't answer. I just took a seat in the back. For a few minutes they discussed landscaping violations and parking decals like nothing unusual was happening. Like my house wasn't the quiet center of everyone's curiosity. Then the president cleared her throat. Next agenda item, resident disturbance complaint. Not property dispute. Not ownership review. Disturbance. She looked directly at me. This individual has been approaching residents and attempting entry into an occupied home. Murmurs moved across the room. I felt heat rise in my neck. Not rage yet, something closer to disbelief. I raised my hand slightly. "May I speak?" She hesitated. Just long enough to show she didn't want to allow it, then nodded for appearances. I stood. "My name is Daniel Carter," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. "That house is mine." A man near the front shook his head before I even finished. "They showed paperwork," he muttered loudly enough for others to hear. I reached into my folder and held up a copy of my deed. "This is recorded with the county." The president didn't even look at it. "The board has already reviewed ownership transfer documents," she replied smoothly. "Transfer." She kept using that word like repetition made it true. I stepped a little closer to the table. "Then read the mailing address the notices were sent to." Silence. One of the board members shifted in his chair. The president smiled again, thinner this time. "We are not required to publicly disclose administrative details." Not required. The room changed in that moment. Not in my favor yet, but the certainty in the air cracked slightly. An older man raised his hand from the second row. "I've lived here 18 years, he said. Why wouldn't you confirm his address if he was deployed? The president kept her voice even. We followed established procedure. I watched her carefully. Not what she said, what she didn't. No denial. Just procedure. Hope flickered briefly. Then the door opened behind me. A man in a suit walked in carrying a leather briefcase, the HOA attorney. He didn't rush. Didn't greet anyone. Just stepped beside the board like he belonged there more than the residents did. I'd advise you to stop making accusations, he said quietly toward me. You're creating a hostile environment. Hostile? I almost laughed at the word. I asked for an address confirmation, I said. That's not hostile. He placed a single document on the table and slid it forward. Attempted trespass documentation. My name printed across the top. A photo attached, me standing at my own front door earlier that day. The angle was from inside the house. Someone had taken it through the curtain. The room shifted again, this time away from me. I heard whispers. I felt it happening, the narrative closing in. I forced myself to slow down before speaking. Did you verify I was deployed before filing this? The attorney didn't answer. The president did. We had no obligation to investigate personal circumstances. There it was. Not a denial. And for the first time, a few faces around the room changed from curiosity to uncertainty. A woman near the back raised her phone slightly. Recording. I took a breath. Then I'm requesting the meeting minutes from the vote that took my home. The attorney responded instantly. Those will be provided through formal legal request. Which meant delay. Which meant time for them. But before the conversation could close, another voice spoke up, hesitant, shaky. The elderly neighbor from 2 houses down stood slowly. I saw workers changing the locks last month, he said. Before anyone moved in. The president turned toward him with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sir, please don't speculate. I'm not, he replied. They had a truck with the developer's logo. The word developer moved through the room like a dropped glass. People knew that name. Promises of new property values. Renovations. Expansion. I watched the attorney carefully now. For the first time, he looked annoyed. A reporter stepped forward near the wall, camera already recording. Did the association coordinate with the developer prior to confirmed ownership, she asked. No one answered immediately. And silence, I realized, could be louder than any confession. The president straightened papers that didn't need straightening. We have nothing further to discuss tonight. Meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped loudly across the floor. Conversations exploded all at once. But nobody rushed out. They stayed, watching the board gather their things quickly, avoiding eye contact as they left through the side door. I stood there in the noise, not victorious, not defeated. Just certain of one thing now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something they needed hidden. And the moment the room stopped believing them completely was the moment they lost control. I went back early the next morning. Not to argue. Not to knock. Just to look at it in daylight, to prove to myself it was still a real place and not something my brain had twisted overnight. The street was quiet. Sprinklers ticking across lawns. Normal life continuing around a house that no longer felt connected to me. I stayed across the road for a while. Then the front door opened. A man stepped out carrying a trash bag. He froze the moment he saw me. Not defensive. Not angry. Nervous. I'm not here to cause problems, I said carefully, hands visible at my sides. He hesitated, then walked closer instead of retreating. They told us you passed away, he said quietly. The words didn't register at first. What? He looked uncomfortable now, like he regretted saying it. The leasing office said the previous owner died overseas and the property cleared legal hold. We signed fast because rent was discounted. Died. I felt my mind trying to process it and failing. So you didn't break in, I said slowly. He shook his head and pulled folded papers from his pocket, a copy of his lease agreement. The company name at the top matched the developer. Move-in date, 2 weeks before the foreclosure transfer was filed. Before. I stared at the date. He followed my eyes and lowered his voice. They changed the locks the day before we moved in. Workers said paperwork was being finalized. My chest tightened. They didn't just take the house after paperwork. They did paperwork after taking the house. A car rolled slowly around the corner, the HOA patrol vehicle. The renter noticed too and stepped back quickly. I shouldn't talk, he muttered, heading inside. The door closed. The new lock clicked. And for the first time, this stopped looking like bureaucracy and started looking planned. The lease date kept replaying in my head the entire drive away. 2 weeks before the transfer. Not after. Not even the same day. Before. Meaning they rented a house they didn't legally own yet. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and just sat there, engine running, staring at the dashboard like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less impossible. There was only one explanation. They were certain the paperwork would work out later. Which meant the paperwork wasn't the start of this. It was the cover. I drove straight to the county records office. Fluorescent lights. Quiet printers humming. People whispering over property maps like they were reading history instead of living inside it. The clerk behind the counter looked tired but kind. I need the full file for this address, I said, sliding my ID across. She typed for a moment, then frowned slightly. You've had a lot of activity recently. That wasn't reassuring. She printed a stack thicker than I expected, liens, notices, filings, affidavits. I sat at a side table and started reading. At first it just looked official. Stamps. Signatures. Legal wording meant to slow you down. Then something small caught my eye. The address change form. It had my name printed, but the signature wasn't mine. Not just messy, structurally wrong. Letters formed differently. The C in Carter closed instead of open. The T crossed low. The kind of difference you don't notice unless you've signed military paperwork 1,000 times. I stared at it longer than I meant to. A woman sat across from me quietly reviewing survey maps. After a moment she glanced at my page. That signature's inconsistent with the deed signature, she said casually. I looked up. She wasn't just anyone, the county staff. Probably saw documents all day. You're sure? She rotated the deed toward me and pointed. Loop patterns. Pressure points. People don't change those. Forgery. The word felt heavy even unspoken. But then I noticed something worse. The affidavit attached to the foreclosure filing stated attempts at personal contact had failed, including a certified notice signed at the false address. Signed. I checked the signature on the delivery receipt. Block letters. Not even close to mine. Someone hadn't just redirected my mail. They'd completed the process for me. I left the records office with copies clutched tighter than my deployment orders had ever been. Outside, I called the only lawyer number I'd been given by a buddy from my unit. He didn't sound surprised after the first minute. Bring everything, he said. Now. His office was small, not flashy like the developer's attorney, but every surface held organized stacks of files instead of decorative law books. He spread the documents across his desk in silence for a while. Then he leaned back slowly. They didn't just rush a foreclosure, he said. They engineered a default. I didn't respond. I just listened. He tapped 3 dates with a pen. Address change submitted. Certified mail received. Board vote same week. Too tight. Too convenient. They needed you unreachable, he continued. Once notices looked valid on paper, the rest becomes procedural. Procedural. The same word the HOA president used. But the lease, I said. He nodded once. That's the problem for them. Renting before legal possession shows intent, not correction of an error. Intent. The room felt quieter. Then he pointed at the deed. Your property also contains a recorded easement access strip. See this? A thin shaded line ran along the back boundary, one I'd always assumed was just utility clearance. The developer's expansion road would need this exact path, he said. I stared at the map. You're saying? They don't just want your house, he finished. They need your land connected to it. Everything rearranged at once. The inspections before deployment. The sudden rule violations. The urgency. They weren't removing a delinquent homeowner. They were clearing an obstacle. As I gathered the papers, he handed me one more document. A public records request he'd already submitted after hearing my situation summarized over the phone earlier. HOA internal meeting recordings. They keep them for liability, he said. Sometimes that backfires. 2 days later we listened to it together. The room in the recording echoed slightly, folding chairs, casual conversation before the official meeting started. Then the president's voice. He's overseas for at least 9 months. Notices will age out. Another voice, and if he contests? A pause. By the time he returns, the property won't be his problem anymore. Paper shuffling. Laughter. I didn't react immediately. I just sat there, hands resting on my knees, feeling a strange calm settle in. All the confusion I'd been carrying, gone. Replaced with certainty. They never expected a conversation. They expected absence. The lawyer stopped the audio. That, he said quietly, changes everything. For the first time since I'd put the key in the lock. I wasn't trying to understand what happened. I understood exactly why it happened. And now, so would a judge. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not temperature, atmosphere. Quiet in a way that didn't allow emotion to hide anywhere. Every sound mattered. Paper moving. Shoes against the tile floor. The low murmur stopping the moment the judge walked in. I sat beside my attorney at the front table. Across from us, the HOA president, their lawyer, and the developer's representative filled the other side. They looked organized. Confident. Like this was routine. For a second, doubt crept back in. Maybe they'd done this enough times to win. The judge adjusted her glasses and began. Counsel, proceed. Their attorney stood first. He spoke smoothly, carefully, framing everything as procedure. Missed dues. Abandoned property. Administrative compliance. He never raised his voice, never attacked me directly. He didn't have to. He just described a version of events where I barely existed. I watched the judge's expression. Neutral. Professional. Then it was our turn. My lawyer didn't rush. He placed a single page onto the evidence screen. The address change form. Your Honor, he said calmly, we'll begin with how this process started. The image enlarged. My printed name at the top. He placed another document beside it, my original deed signature. Side by side. Even from where I sat, the difference was obvious. The judge leaned forward slightly. Their attorney shifted in his chair. Next, my lawyer continued, the certified mail confirmation used to justify non-response. A new image appeared, the delivery receipt signature. Block letters. Nothing like mine. The first crack in their composure appeared. The HOA president whispered to her attorney. My lawyer didn't pause. Now the timeline. He displayed 3 dates. Address change submitted. Certified notice acknowledged. Board vote to recover property. All within days. Finally, he said, the lease agreement. The date appeared on screen. 2 weeks before foreclosure filing. The developer's representative exhaled sharply. The judge's eyes moved from one table to the other. Counsel, she said slowly to the HOA attorney, how was the property leased prior to lawful possession? Silence. Not long, but long enough. Their attorney stood. Administrative anticipation. My lawyer interrupted gently. We also have recorded board discussion regarding anticipation. He pressed play. The room filled with the echoing recording. He's overseas for at least 9 months. Notices will age out. The courtroom went still. No shifting chairs. No typing. Just a recording finishing in the air. The judge removed her glasses. And the entire tone of the room changed. Is that your board meeting? She asked. The president tried to respond, but her voice came out smaller than before. Yes, but... The judge raised a hand. She didn't need the rest. My lawyer placed the final exhibit, the survey map, onto the screen. A shaded strip across my property. The developer's planned road requires this easement access, he explained. Without it, their approved expansion fails. The judge looked directly at the developer's representative now. Understanding replaced neutrality. I felt it physically, like pressure leaving the room. Their attorney attempted one more argument about procedure. The judge stopped him mid-sentence. No, she said firmly. This is not procedural error. She looked down at her notes briefly, then back up. This is a coordinated deprivation of property under false documentation. My hands tightened on the table edge. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. She continued. The transfer is void. Possession is restored immediately. All related filings are vacated. Further, this matter will be referred for review of potential fraudulent conduct. The words didn't hit all at once. They landed piece by piece. Void. Restored. Vacated. Across the room, the HOA president stared forward without moving. The developer's representative whispered urgently to his lawyer. For the first time since I'd come home, nobody was looking at me like I didn't belong there. The judge gathered her papers. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. And just like that, the house was mine again, not because I argued louder, but because the truth finally had somewhere it couldn't be ignored. The door opened the same way it always had. No resistance. No wrong feeling in the lock. Just a quiet click and the soft push inward. I didn't step inside right away. I stood there for a few seconds, hands still on the handle, letting the silence settle. The house smelled different, unfamiliar detergent, someone else's cooking lingering in the air, but underneath it was still there. Home doesn't disappear all at once. It waits. The renters had already moved out by court order. A few boxes remained stacked near the wall where my couch used to be. One of them had my last name written across the top in marker, misspelled. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and set the bent key on the counter, the one that wouldn't turn the day I came back. I kept it in my pocket through everything. Proof that the moment was real. Outside, a couple neighbors watched quietly from their driveways. Not curious now. Careful. I didn't wave. I didn't say anything. I just locked the door from the inside. And for the first time since returning, the lock was on my side.